Hi, Ben from My Cycling Coach. If you're watching this and you're a business owner, entrepreneur, time crunch, busy professional who has to travel a lot with work and just finds that work travel really disrupts your training, your nutrition, and then is potentially preventing you from achieving any weight loss targets or maintaining or improving your fitness and health, then I want to share this with you today. As prior to me actually settling here now in the Alps, this is something that I had to do on a really regular basis. The role that I was doing required me to travel. I was away for 3 days, 5 days, even some days up to 2 weeks periods every single month, and just found that, as I was saying, it was also a real big disruption to maintaining any consistency with my nutrition, my diet and my training, and just found that it had a really detrimental effect on that, until I actually really started to find out and form some habits that I found actually eventually allowed me to keep those things going, make progress, see progression with that as I incorporated those habits into when I was on the road, found that these really worked. And these exact habits now and the systems and what we've formed here is what I now implement with my clients. Literally just had a client come back from a 2-week work trip over in the States in New York, and really happy to say that they've come back from that trip where previously they may have found that they've actually during that time have put on 2 to 3 kilos. They've actually come back and lost 2 kg, and it's through doing these top 3 tips that I'm just going to share with you today with what I personally found just in my journey really started to work well to allow me to actually maintain or lose weight while still being able to undergo my professional work role on the road, but also really maintain or at least sustain, build fitness whilst traveling as well. Now, the first tip then, just to get really straight into it, is looking at through your day, the meals that you're having. No doubt if you're on the road and you're having to do, client meetings, you're in meetings all day, you might be staying in hotels, you might be in conference centers. I imagine that you're probably going to be really catered for throughout the day, which is obviously a lovely thing to have. You know that you're having breakfast, lunch and dinner provided, but that probably means that your daily calorie intake is really going to increase. And that is generally what can then obviously cause that weight gain whilst you're away on that particular business or work trip. Now, what I found really helped was actually trying to just drop one of those meals, because if you're sitting down all day, your energy expenditure whilst you're away may also drop. So calories will increase, but your energy expenditure that you're doing just not through exercising much, because you're pretty much just sitting in that conference room, sitting in those meetings all day, that energy expenditure obviously then comes down. And if you're then being provided 3 meals and you're eating all 3 of those meals, then that's where that weight gain is going to occur. Certainly if this is on a 3 to 5, maybe even longer 2-week business trip that you're on. So what I found really worked well for me, and what we've now been implementing with that client who I mentioned just come back from the States, but many of our clients now, over 500 clients that we work with and help install these habits in their lifestyles, is really just trying to remove one of those meals. And wherever that really works best for you on that particular, the daily schedule. So for many, what I've found is actually breakfast is one of the easiest meals to really remove, because generally if you're away, as I say, staying in hotels or you're doing client meetings later into the evening, then probably the bulk of your calories that you're taking in are going to be, the evening prior. So that generally means you've probably, I refer to eating as fueling a lot, obviously as a cyclist, the bulk of your fueling for that day, if you like, or the bulk of your calories has probably been in the evening. So generally you may still wake up actually feeling, quite full after a bigger meal, maybe some drinks on the evening prior. So if there's a meal that you can actually remove or just really take the calories out of, is breakfast. So you may just, if you're staying in a hotel, wake up, have your coffee. If you really feel like you need to eat something, you may just have a piece of fruit, or go for, I would always recommend a really higher protein option, a small meal, but something that's just really high in protein, low in carbohydrates and potentially fats. But ideally, if you know that actually you're going into client meetings all day, and actually lunch and dinner again on that next day is also going to be, quite big meal options or calorific meals, then really, just removing breakfast, making sure you're staying hydrated, having some coffee there. I know that comes into play with the hydration there a little bit, but yeah, coffee, maybe even just a glass of fruit juice, and that should be really set you up well for the day, and you probably don't need extra calories through that as well. You can then go into the day, because you have effectively removed one meal, you've probably saved yourself actually around 500 calories from breakfast, maybe even more in some cases, depending on how much you like your breakfast. But you've saved yourself effectively 500 to 600 calories there, maybe even more, as I say, that you've then actually got to put into those other 2 meals later in the day. Now, depending on your work schedule, the schedule where you're doing your meetings and things, it might actually be that it's more of a, breakfast brunch meeting that you're having. So potentially in your schedule whilst you're away, it might be that actually the lunch meal is potentially what you may actually remove from the day. You know that you're having a later breakfast with clients, with customers, whatever that may be, around mid-morning, in which case you don't actually really need lunch because you've obviously eaten a little bit later in the morning anyway, had some more calories there, and you'll find that lunch is what you will then generally remove. So really your two main meals in that example would be breakfast and then later on in the evening dinner, whether that's because you're just eating in the hotel on your own, or if you've got another client meeting or another meetings to have later on in the afternoon or going into the evening, you've removed lunch and you've saved yourself some calories that way. The other option would be then, going into the evening, you may find actually the bulk of your client meetings are in the day, so it might be breakfast meetings, it might be lunch meetings, and you have to really eat something there. You might be able to still go for some lighter options, but you can actually then just find that, okay, if you know that you've had quite a lot of calories through the day, in the evening, you may go for a real sort of lighter option if you can access it in the hotel, whether that be something more on like a nice salad with some high protein sources in it would be really good. If you've had some more, higher calorific meals and you just haven't been able to get anything at breakfast and lunch during the day. So really, tip number one, what I've really found has worked well is just actually removing one meal from the day, and that allows you to just keep your calories lower rather than having, 3 big meals throughout the day, which you probably typically wouldn't have potentially when you're at home in your normal routine and not in a hotel where you've got those, lovely options and you're being catered for those 3 meals there. The second tip then is where we actually come a bit more into the exercise side of things. So obviously, if you're watching this, there's probably a good chance that you're a cyclist, but when you're away, sometimes you might not always be able to access a bike. But just forms of training that I found, again, really worked well for me when I was on the road, but we use with our clients. And we found this year have been working amazing, or not just this year, but we've really always refining and tweaking this with the clients and finding new strategies and habits and ways to really manage that work travel while still being able to lose the weight and build the fitness. On the training side of things, it's really looking at doing some fasted exercise first thing in the morning is a great way to actually burn some calories. That fat adaptation, get some positive adaptations with that, the fat adaptation side of things, but also just burning some calories, especially if, like I just said, that the evening prior you have had a big meal, client meeting, or it's just been maybe a several course dinner that you've been had, or a buffet option maybe. If you then wake up in the morning, you're feeling quite full, you can actually just go straight into first thing in the morning doing a little bit of fasted training. So I would always recommend to try and keep this between 45 minutes to 90 minutes. You may not have 90 minutes, you may not even have 45 minutes. If you can do half an hour, great. But if you can literally in the morning get straight up, you don't need to take anything on breakfast wise or fuel wise before, because you've had a big meal the night before. You can literally get up. If you can access a bike, if there's a gym there, great. If you can go on a treadmill, rowing machine, or if you can literally just go out for a walk. If you do a little bit of running, you can do some running as well. If you've got access to a gym, then that's great. But really try with this in exercise intensity to try to target around 70% of your FTP, functional threshold power. Lots of gyms out there now do have things like Peloton bikes, Watt bikes, where you even can track, power, wattage whilst you're on the road, which is fantastic because you can just improve the accuracy of your training whilst you're away. So there I would really be trying to target half an hour. If you can get 45 minutes first thing in the morning to potentially an hour and a half, depending on how much time you've got, potentially, before your first client meeting or the business day really kicks off, then half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour and a half at zone 2, 70% of your FTP. If it's on a bike, is fantastic. If you can't access a bike with power tracking, or you can access a bike, but you can't access, power tracking with watts, then you can obviously use heart rate. And you may have, Garmin devices, you may have your smartwatch, whatever it is, your Apple Watch, whatever you've got access to. And you can actually then use heart rate to just track that exercise intensity a little bit. So you can get on there and do, I'd advise around 70 to 80% of your heart rate max. You can go on, you can do again, some zone 2, some fasted work at that 70 to 80% of your heart rate max. Or you can do that on a treadmill, you can do that on a cross trainer, whatever piece of cardio equipment that you've got there. You can even just go out and get, do some faster paced walking. You might be able to get your heart rate up to that whilst, just doing some faster paced walking or a really light jog. There's great ways that, lots of different ways that you can do that depending on what you have access to with where you're obviously staying. If you don't have access to any data, then in terms of that zone 2, sort of fasted type training, as an RPE, so rate of perceived exertion, if you're trying to do it just based on feel, you want to, let's just say that you're on the phone with somebody, and if you were exercising right now, I'll be able to say, are you exercising? I can hear that your breathing rate is elevated, but you can actually still hold a conversation. And that's really like the RPE for zone 2, if you like. your breathing rate has increased, but you can still hold a conversation. And as I say, if I was on the phone to you, I'd probably be able to tell you're exercising, but you can sustain that for a good period of time quite comfortably. A nice way to train, nice way to actually get some exercise in. Certainly if you've got a busy day ahead, just some zone 2 exercise there to burn some calories. Do that in a fasted way will really actually allow you to then, as I say, bank some calories for the day with the meals that you've got coming, burn some extra calories there. It's a great way to be able to do that with exercise, but not just exercising to actually then be able to eat more. Effectively, that is one way of doing it. But also from that zone 2 type training, you're also getting really good performance benefits with that, cardiovascular health, longevity with your health, building that aerobic base, your recovery, and really your energy levels that you'll also feel just through your work day there as well. So that's one way of looking at it. The other way is to also if you're doing the fasted training, then it's hard to sometimes do any interval training with this. So you actually do need to eat something before. So I'd say any zone 2 training is great because you don't need to actually eat anything before. But a 4x4 VO2 max session, if you've been following any of my stuff for a while, is also a really good protocol to use to really just, burn through some calories. And I would recommend this session, as it's 4x4 minutes, pretty much just based on feel all out. If you're doing it based on FTP, it would be around 106 to 120% of your FTP. If you're doing it based on your heart rate max, it would be around 95% of your heart rate max for those 4-minute intervals that you're doing. And if you're doing it based off feel, it's literally just all out for those 4 minutes to get into that VO2 max zone. Again, you're going to be improving your VO2 max. You're going to be really burning some calories. There's some great performance benefits with that as well. Take just 4-minute recovery between each of the 4 minutes. And that way, if you've actually been doing some interval training and you don't just want to do some, zone 2 riding, I'd recommend that you do that, but you would like to just have something a little bit more intense and you are currently doing some interval training whilst you're at home, then that 4x4 minute VO2 max protocol is a really good one. You can complete that whole session with a 10 to 15 minute warm up, do the 4x4 and then a cool down for about 10 minutes. And you can get that done in under an hour. And you've had a really good training session there to be able to improve that VO2 max, get some great benefits. But also you'll just, in a session like that, you're probably within an hour going to burn around 750 calories. Maybe I've seen some guys when they've been on the road and we've been tracking their heart rate and power data, they've actually burnt even near to 1,000 calories during that 4x4 VO2 max session there. So that's a really good one. So 2 training examples that we found have actually worked really well. Bit of variation there as well, and you can choose the form of exercise that you will use depending on what you have available with, where you're staying. Third tip then, guys, third and final tip is really looking at the calories that you are consuming, if you're able to do this. Now, it is sometimes hard to do this. I know when you may have like a set menu, it might be, buffet is probably actually not, this could help this tip actually if you have a buffet option because you have a little bit more choice in what you could actually eat. But if you're on like a set menu where you have very limited choice in terms of what you can actually eat at lunch and dinner time, then I have found always just going for the highest protein option with potentially the lowest amount of carbohydrates in it to really help in terms of just better quality calories and actually making you feel fuller for longer with that protein. Good sources. So for you, if you can get, fish, meats, beans, all those protein options, great proteins options. I'm not going to list all of them, but there's many out there. And if you're on the menu and you're looking through the menu and you can see that there's some of those things on there, you can obviously eat those things. You may be vegan, vegetarian, you might have to look for other higher protein options there. Your diet may potentially be actually a little bit lower in calories anyway, if you go for that option. But always with having that, when you're looking through a menu, if you can go for the highest protein source option on that menu, then generally you'll probably find it's a little bit lower in calories. Those calories are going to be better quality there. And if you can have it with, some micronutrients as well. So it might be, like a salad or just with some fruits or some vegetables. If that's an option there, then great. Or you can even just remove the carbohydrates from a potential option. So let's just say if it's something like you do only have access to, I don't know, burger and chips or steak and chips or something with chips, or it's like really got quite a lot of carbohydrates in it, then you can always just say, right, actually, I don't want it with chips, or, remove that option from it. And if you're still having a burger with a bun and, some protein sources there or other higher protein options, then just by removing those carbohydrates and going for the higher protein, I found really serve me well, serves our clients well when we're looking to just manage those meals that you're away. Obviously, with a buffet example that I mentioned, there's certainly a breakfast, or if you're staying somewhere, it's a conference and you have access to a buffet as part of your meals, then really just going for the higher protein option. If they've got fish there, they've got some meats there, they've got some salads, they've got some vegetables, in which case you're actually really well catered for and you can make some really good choices with that. And again, I would just go for the high protein, lots of micronutrients, fruits, veg, salads as part of your meals if you do have access to that sort of thing there. So yeah, guys, I hope you found that useful. Just really those 3 tips, what I found before I was based here in the Alps full time and settled here now. I used to do a lot of travel and just found it be so disruptive to training, nutrition, maintaining my weight, achieving, maintaining fitness and health whilst on the road. And those 3 tips there, we're now implementing those with our clients as well. Portfolio business owners, entrepreneurs, busy professionals that we've helped really achieve their goals. And as I say, we've just had a few guys come back from the States there. They've been in New York for 2 weeks and actually been able to find that they've lost weight whilst they're away, when previously they would be putting weight on from what they were doing before. So if you found that useful, please drop a like on the video. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Ben from My Cycling Coach. Please hit that subscribe button. Trying to put out as much content to really help you guys when you're on your journeys, whether that be with the weight loss, your fitness, your health. But keep up the great work. Safe travels. Speak to you soon.